Good afternoon, everyone. It is Friday again. I am Sam Osterhout, the executive producer here at Lincoln Square with Democratic strategist and SiriusXM host, Max Burns. Max, you got the memo about the pastel shirt.
I did. We're matching again. It's spring. It's finally spring in New York, and it is winter in Donald Trump's world. So I'm happy on both sides. How are you, man?
Yeah, it's like nuclear winter with Donald Trump. The polling on him is wild. 38%
Yeah.
approval. He is dipping down. Oh, look, we're going to get to that. I want to get through 5 stories because it's been a weird week. How would you define this week in a sentence? Let's start there.
I would have to create a word. My word would be blah. It's a very strange week, right? It's clear the wheels are coming off in the White House. It's
Yeah.
clear Donald Trump sees it, but they are incapable of getting out of this spin. And then at the same time, the economy is finally starting to get the hit from the war in Iran, and things are slowly starting to shut down a little bit. I mean, in a week or two more, this is going to be in a real tough spot, not just for Trump, but for everybody.
Yeah. So look, let's jump into that because there are all of these stories. I think this week are part and parcel of the same issue, right? And the underlying the base layer of all of this is Trump's just absolute incompetence as an administrator, as a tactician, if you will. This I think is a real defining picture this week.
Amazing.
It's an incredible picture. I looked for a sound effect of snoring, but I can't afford the license, if we're being honest.
Everything about this hits me like we've turned these meetings into officials standing behind him like it's a Soviet conference. Well, he sleeps and everyone has to pretend that he isn't. It is just an amazing unreality we've entered into.
It is. It is so crazy to me. You stand behind this man. You're wearing shoes that are too big because he's making you wear them. Did anyone forget about that? And you just go on as if the meeting is taking place like normal. And also, you have to continue to keep up the lies that he himself or mistakes that he himself has said. And we're going to get to that when we talk about math here in a minute. But look, let's start with the first story, these tech cuts. What do we have? We have Meta is cutting around 10% of its workforce,
Yep.
8,000 jobs. They've pulled not only that, but 6,000 open positions. So positions they're not going to hire for. And they're not making a secret of why this is happening.
Yeah, this is all AI. They're investing $153 billion in AI technologies. The same with Microsoft, which is cutting out bonuses and offering buyouts to almost 9,000 people so that it can free up money for AI. And Meta's going even further. They announced that all of their employees are now required to have technology on their devices that will track their mouse clicks and keystrokes and how they use a computer. And it's explicitly designed to train AI into how to do their jobs. So they've built the ultimate scab employee to replace them.
So I wonder, we've been talking about AI for months and years even. And a lot of us have said, what are we going to do when the shit hits the fan? Is this the shit hitting the fan?
I mean, it's certainly getting awful stinky in here. I mean, you've got companies like Microsoft explicitly saying you can take the buyout and go, or we're going to make life unpleasant for you. They announced they're making it tougher to get bonuses. They're restricting the stock options they give. And this is all in an effort, as Microsoft says out loud, to make the company less attractive to humans, which raises the question, if your company isn't for humans, who is it for? And who's going to have any money to buy any of the stuff you're producing if your company is no longer about people?
Well, you tell me. What is happening? What is the future of this? Where does this go from here?
Well, this to me, I've been saying is both the high point of capitalism, because you get rid of all your human employees. You don't have to pay anyone. It's 100% profit. but it's also sort of the end of capitalism. Because if no one is working and making money, how are they buying any of the products that you're producing? Who are you making these things for? Aside from the psychological trauma of mass unemployment, which, as we've seen in the past, always puts people in the mood to buy tech stuff.
I'm really actually I'm struggling with this because I believe what you're saying, and I think that there's a future, whether it's in 2 weeks or 10 years or 50 years, where something other than capitalism exists in this world. And I think it's probably something that we can't even envision quite yet. I imagine the serfs on their lord's land working their home garden and giving some of the crops to, the guy in the big house up there, and not ever imagining that there would be a stock market, right? Where numbers that feel, where capital is making money on itself.
Yeah, it's basically a system where the AI and the tech makes everything, and then it's given to you because you can't buy it, you have no money, but it's only given to you to the extent that the tech companies feel it should be given to you. So because you have no purchasing power, you have no power. But the other side, as Elon Musk said at the end of this, or earlier this week, that he thinks a universal basic income is necessary, that we just need to give people money so that they can buy things and stay alive. And what's funny is all of his followers in his comments said, "We can't do that, Elon. That's communism. You said this would make everybody rich. And now you're saying unless the government gives us money, we're all going to starve." So mask is coming off this fun stuff.
Except the difference obviously is that in communism, the people theoretically own the means of production and the product, right? This one or two people do, and the rest of us just get whatever they decide. I wonder if this is part of a bigger story with people like Musk or like Peter Thiel and companies like Palantir, whose employees currently are wondering if perhaps they're the bad guys. Spoiler, they're the bad guys. If this is their push into actual governance, right? We're seeing democratic norms being eroded. Our systems are being destroyed. Trump is the chaos maker at the very top. And meanwhile, the billionaires are really exerting true power. We're looking at technocracy, kind of, right?
Yeah, I mean, these executives are so rich and so successful at this because they've built these moats of non-competition, and the government is literally backing them over others. They think they know better. They think people like Peter Thiel aren't hiding this, right? They've explicitly written about how they think capitalism and freedom are not compatible anymore, and that liberal democracy has run its course. They're unimpressed with the results, as Peter Thiel says, and their system is going to be better, or at least it's going to have less social problems, which is shorthand for repression.
Yeah, capitalism. I wish the arc reactor says this is technofeudalism. I've never heard of technofeudalism, but it's brilliant. Ran by 8 or 9 technocratic feudal lords and ladies. Exactly. That's exactly right. And the rest of us are, like the end of Candide. It's time to tend our own gardens, right? That's the message here. If you're just tuning in, this is the end of the week with Max Burns and me, Sam Osterhout. Max, I want to turn a little bit to this guy.
Great. I know I'll be attacked by the left and call me white supremacist, but I have one ask for them. It's just when you give me my hood, make sure it's got the little slits and not the circles so I can see better.
Captain Hung Cal, thank you very much for joining.
One more guy. And you're conservative, and you love God, and you love America, like all the things.
And I'm African American because I grew up in Africa too. So.
Oh, really? An African American Vietnamese. Here we go.
Again, it's we can't let it turn like this. There's a place in Monterey, California called Lovers Point.
Yeah.
The original name was Lovers of Christ Point, but now it's become they took out the Christ. It's Lovers Point, and it's really Monterey is a very dark place now.
Yeah.
A lot of witchcraft and the Wiccan community has really taken over there, and we can't let that happen in Virginia. Virginia is.
So Max, he must be like a pastor or like a right-wing weird white Christian, or maybe a cult leader. Who is this guy?
Well, surprise, this is your new acting Secretary of the Navy. He's in command of all the nuclear submarines and all the Coast Guard ships and all the aircraft carriers. And he was brought in after Donald Trump fired the previous Secretary of the Navy because of personal disagreements. There's speculation this happened in part because Pete Hegseth worried the Secretary of the Navy was better friends with Donald Trump than Hegseth was, and so got rid of him to get rid of a potential rival. But Hung Cao, I'm a former Virginian. He ran unsuccessfully for the House, unsuccessfully for the Senate. He has a list of crazy opinions, but the only thing that recommends him to the job is that he's one of Trump's most loyal yes men. Though he might be right. I do think California is full of witches.
Yeah, but maybe in a good way. I don't know. It's great. Who cares? I wonder what, I know the Secretary of the Navy is really an administrative position. I talked to Bobby Jones from Anchor Watch earlier in the week when this whole thing went down with Phelan, stepping down. Of course, I texted Bobby, and he said, "Well, that position is pretty administrative." And Phelan himself was a billionaire, and that's why he got the job in the first place, who had never served. But is this a good look during a war in which our Navy is the tip of the spear?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's an administrative position, but we're in the middle of a war that's trying to be administered. We're managing a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz without a confirmed Secretary of the Navy. And our new Secretary of the Navy has never held a position of this scope, managing this level of resources. Like, listen, the problem with the Trump administration isn't that it has an excess of good administrators, right? These people barely know what's going on when they have people who are vaguely qualified. Here's a guy who now has to manage the Strait of Hormuz, who is going to be pushing up against Trump, who wants to escalate the naval war. Phelan didn't. And we've already seen that another aircraft carrier is on its way to the Gulf. So far from winding this war down, Hung Cao is going to do whatever Donald Trump wants to do to worsen the war and escalate it.
Yeah, I've read some analysis that said that Phelan was walked out because he couldn't deliver a new battleship sooner than 2028. And the reason he couldn't do that is because it's impossible. We cannot manufacture a battleship that quickly. So look, all of this is just performative, and it's performative in the same way that this is performative, right? You have to stand up and you have to say the things, and you have to make the promises. And the battleship thing, I'm sure for Phelan was, if that's, at least part of the reason he was fired. I'm sure he was just hoping Trump would forget, or Hegseth would forget that, it's coming. And
what's really scary to me about the way this happened is that it shows nobody in the White House trusts the chain of command.
Right.
When Phelan was informed he was fired, he said, "No, I don't believe you. I don't believe Donald Trump said this." He then went to the White House and sat in the lobby outside the Oval Office for 2 hours waiting for Donald Trump to come out because he didn't believe that this was a lawful order. I mean, in the middle of a war, in a national security situation, God forbid a crisis happens, are we going to have military and national security officials sitting outside Trump's bedroom waiting to make sure the orders have actually come from him? That is terrifying.
It's terrifying. I think the other interesting thing about this is Trump never did come out. He messaged on social media that it was in fact true that he'd been fired, or that he was, stepping down or retiring or whatever he was doing.
Couldn't even do it.
This is the guy who is president, in part at least, because he became famous saying "you're fired." Right? Mr. Tough Guy can't face his billionaire pal to do this. And I think you're absolutely right. You remember in the first administration, a lot of bad impulses were stopped because the notes just kind of didn't get delivered to the president. Right? The president would make an order, and then they would just forget to deliver the order, right? There's, I imagine there's some slowdown, work slowdowns like that in this administration, but it's not enough. I think there are too many people who want to see this whole thing come tumbling down.
Yeah.
One of whom, let's talk about Virginia, because I think Virginia, what a fucking week, Max. We started.
You're telling me.
Oh man, we started with Virginia and this redistricting vote. That as Virginians took to the polls, there was some word that this was going to be a blowout. It was a lot closer than I think a lot of us had hoped. Can you talk about the outcome, and then let's talk about the future of what's actually going to happen?
Yeah, this was a big test for Governor Abigail Spanberger. A lot of people didn't think Democrats could get this over the line. It's a 51-48 vote, fairly close, but around what the last polls showed. And this will net Democrats about 4 seats, which means that this redistricting push that started with Greg Abbott and Donald Trump in Texas now looks like one of the GOP's biggest missteps in a generation. Because if this goes forward, Democrats will, as of now, have more seats they've netted from this than Republicans have. And there's still New York tied up in the courts. Maryland is still looking to redistrict. So this could end up actually putting Republicans in a way less defensible position than they were a year ago.
Let me ask you, what was the arithmetic the Republicans were playing with when they began this fight? Clearly, they didn't anticipate this kind of pushback.
No, I really think Republicans thought Democrats are so opposed to redistricting and to gerrymandering that they would sit on their hands and just not do anything. A lot of people were surprised when Gavin Newsom got California moving to do it. And it just shows you where we are, that Democrats, it took a while to get the memo, but they're actually swinging back on this stuff and not saying, well, at least we have the high ground as the ground erodes out from under them. And now it's in a position where, based on what the Supreme Court does with this Calais decision on the Voting Rights Act, we could see states go back again next year. California could very quickly decide it wants a map with no Republicans, and nothing would really stop them from doing that.
So let me ask you big picture then. I mean, look, the gerrymandering is undemocratic. It really, there's no other way to put it. Right? Everyone needs to be able to vote their conscience, vote for the people who they would like to be in. And gerrymandering often harms voters of color more than it harms anyone. Where does this go? And I know the Democratic states have sort of added temporary measures, right? This will go back to normal when the Republicans step down and all this kind of thing. But I don't know that that's true. I think once you pull this genie out of the bottle, you can't really get it back in. Where does this take our democracy? Is this a sort of accidental fissure, an accidental transition?
Well, it goes nowhere good. I mean, both parties have just abandoned the idea that the census and districts are about fair representation. That seems now like a quaint idea. The idea is to draw districts as strong for your party as you can and get rid of as many, if not all, of the opposition. Problem is, in super safe districts, we see that means candidates can take more extreme positions. And when you get a Congress full of people who are so safe that they can take extreme non-compromise positions, it leads to what we have now, which is a Congress that can't work, that doesn't pass legislation. Democrats are so eager to win back the House that I don't think they've thought about what happens if you have a House completely ungovernable, even with your own people in it. And the sad result of all of this is that if we go back next year and start redistricting again, I fear this will just become a trend, and we will have, there's only about 15 or 16 seats in the House right now that are truly competitive within about 5 points. We get rid of those, you have a House that is completely unrepresentative to the will of people and entirely beholden to the parties.
What's the fix?
You've got to uncap the House. I mean, one is to uncap the House, right? And make it so that we can bring representation back down. When we started this, each member of Congress represented about 100,000 people. Now it's over 700,000. You add to the House, you change representation. That likely also increases the number of parties you get because you're appealing to a more granular group. But you also need to take this out of the hands of parties. We need nonpartisan redistricting processes because this is nuts. We cannot keep doing this every year. The expense alone is huge for these states.
Yeah, it's untenable to say the least. And I think that, look, it also sets the legislative agenda towards redistricting alone, right? There's shit that actually has to get done that's not redistricting and not running elections and not running campaigns and not fundraising. You got to fill potholes and make the trains run on time. And if you are constantly having to vote on this, you don't do any of that. But fortunately, we'll have Palantir and a
they're going to make it so you don't have to worry about voting anymore. They'll vote for you.
Yeah.
So at least we've got that. We get our Tuesdays back.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. So I just want to pivot a little more. I think this is the right one. Oh yeah.
Reminded when the president was speaking of a conversation that I had yesterday with one of the Democratic senators who was questioning me during a hearing, and she was ridiculing President Trump for his math, and she was saying it's mathematically impossible to have a drug drop by 600% cost, which he had claimed. And I said, well, if the drug was $100 and it raised the price to $600, that would be a 600% rise. Well, if it drops from 600 to 100, that's a 600% savings. And the president used that mathematical device to illustrate the magnitude of the theft that has been happening against our country and our people, as he said.
Look, I'm going to mute it and go back and look at Dr. Oz.
I was just going to say, never a good sign when you're being laughed at.
Yeah. Well, and then he's like, yep, the math checks out. This mathematical device. Look, I think this is a part of the bigger story we were talking about earlier, the sycophants in the White House. These guys aren't administrators, they're clowns. Who's the next to go?
I mean, we've seen Trump seemingly protecting the men who are completely incompetent around him and getting rid of the women. The White House apparently has told Tulsi Gabbard she has until the midterms to get out or she will be pushed out. She's fighting it. But to go back to that Kennedy clip, I don't want to blow anybody's mind here with astrophysics, but a $100 to a $600 increase is 500%, not 600. And a $600 to $100 decrease is like an 83% decrease. If it was 600%, they would be paying you to take the drug. The number would be negative. The fact that he is so confident in that gets to the exact problem for why this administration can't solve its problem.
Look, this is the same guy who did this.
Do you know how much overall enrollment is expected to decline?
No, I know that the last time we looked at it, it was flat, except for the 1.5 million people who were cheating. So 1.5 million who were committing fraud. If you deduct that number, the enrollment was flat, but I don't know how it will be.
Or this.
Mr. Chairman, we've done better at controlling the outbreak than any country in the world. This is a global outbreak.
So controlling the outbreak better than anyone in the world, which is absolutely not true. There's something like 1,800 cases. Last year, there were 250, something like that. It is an outbreak. Maybe what he means is that we caused an outbreak and we're controlling it, and no other country in the world has an outbreak. So perhaps that logic is true.
It must be. I mean, Kennedy was on the Hill multiple times this week talking to lawmakers, Republicans were standing up and saying, your math is incorrect. He claimed that vaccines don't make people less likely to get the flu. We saw the Republican senator from Louisiana stand up and say, I have the numbers right here. You have misread the study that you're citing. You don't understand the math. And then you had Republicans in the House pointing out that the measles epidemic has skyrocketed. There have been thousands of cases in 2025 alone. You had one Republican lawmaker say to Kennedy's face that the idea that Tylenol causes autism is nonsense. He's the father of an autistic child. And Kennedy threw up his hands and he said, well, what do you expect? I'm just the Secretary of Health and Human Services. I can't be expected to know all the numbers.
Oh my God. So how did he, 6 months ago, I was writing about him every week. What happened in that 6 months? Our attention moved elsewhere. We started bombing Venezuela and Iran and all of this. Why doesn't he just go where he came from and stay out of the public light?
I mean, he is obsessed with attention. I mean, you look at this guy, Kennedy, you look at Hegseth, you look at Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, all these people who said, if I was in government, I'd fix it. This is what I do, and we'd fix it in a week. And now they are in government or have been kicked out of government, and they spend their whole time, like Kennedy does, throwing up his hands and saying, what do you expect me to do? This is hard. I mean, Kennedy was the lead lawyer on a case about glyphosate, a fertilizer that causes cancer. We're seeing higher rates of cancer in Iowa because of it. He was asked about that at a hearing this week. And he said, well, yeah, I did believe that, but Donald Trump really thinks that it's good for farmers. So I can't be expected to tell him he's wrong. Then why are you there? You're the Secretary of Health.
Why do you exist?
Why do you exist? Why are you the way that you are? As Michael Scott said.
Yeah, or as Jack Donaghy says, what happened to you? Look, I think we need to talk about, to round this week off, we had job cuts in tech. We have Hung Cao, the new acting Secretary of the Navy. We have the Virginia vote. That's number 3. RFK's math and sycophants. We didn't even talk about Kash Patel, who had a real banger of a week.
That's fine. He's not awake yet.
No, no. And if he is, he's, it's Friday. Sorry. So now I think we need to talk about condoms.
Naturally. This is, talk about Donald Trump failing in his commitment to protect the American people. Now condoms are more expensive.
Yeah.
And it's all because of this war in Iran. I mean, the major condom producers saying, because they're produced using latex, can't get the stuff to make them. So now you're going to pay more to have sex. And that is really going to upset Pete Hegseth.
It's not just the materials. It's also, shipping, and it's all of the things. They make something like 5 or 6 billion condoms a year. There's some joke there about Mar-a-Lago. I don't know. But anyway.
You know as well as I do, they don't use condoms at Mar-a-Lago.
It's true. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, none of them. Well, anyway, too many jokes. I wonder if this is just a bank shot for eliminating birth control. Like Trump's 5D chess. He says, look, all of these guys, the Russell votes, the Hegseths, they want to get rid of birth control. What if, go with me here, we start a war with Iran? It triggers the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. The biggest manufacturer of, you see where I'm going here?
I think it's impressive. You think Donald Trump can handle that many steps in a logical plan?
He can't. He can't. So Max, this is actually a way into the war in Iran. This topic, it is still simmering. It is a will they, won't they sort of thing. Let's watch I think it's this one.
Ceasefire. Weapon season.
Trump is extending the ceasefire deadline, announcing the move on Truth Social.
Duck season.
We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
Rabbit season!
The U.S. will continue its naval blockade.
I want to make a great deal.
Rabbit season!
The president insisting the U.S. remains in a strong position.
We're going to make sure that they never have a nuclear weapon.
Duck season! Fire!
So, look, it's hard to ever know exactly where we are, right? With this, as of Monday, which feels like 6 months ago, Trump was saying again that he was going to send them back to the Stone Age. The ceasefire was set to expire over the next day or two. J.D. Vance, the master negotiator that he is, had not left country, and it essentially fell apart. And then it didn't fall apart.
Yeah.
Clearly, it feels like Iran holds all of the cards in this, and Trump is dodging and weaving and trying to make sense of some policy and some endgame. But what is the endgame here? And is the endgame for Trump just to get bored and move on?
I don't even think Donald Trump has an endgame anymore. I mean, his dementia pills must be stuck in the Strait of Hormuz because he doesn't even know what his war has accomplished. In this press conference he held, he said both that we've decimated Iran, that they have no weapons left, no way to oppose us, but also we have to double down because they have missiles now that can hit Europe, and that they're working on a nuclear weapon, which apparently, how do they do that? We supposedly destroyed all of their nuclear facilities years ago. And now you see Donald Trump saying both we're extending the ceasefire 3 weeks because they begged us. But we know that Iran hasn't even shown up to the ceasefire hearings in days. They've completely stopped attending because they know they can get what they want from Trump without having to get out of bed. I mean, the guy has no cards, and even his own Republicans are starting to doubt it. We're expecting a war powers vote as early as next week in the House because the deadline's coming up. Quite a few Republicans who opposed it before are now saying they will vote for it. And the Senate is quite a few senators saying they're not going to authorize any further funding unless there's a war powers vote. That's not a great sign you have it under control.
So let me ask though, does that give Trump a way out? Blame the failure on Congress. They don't vote for it.
I don't know if he wants a way out. Like at this point, his ego is so bruised by this and the inability to open the strait. He's now fixated on the strait. Remember, we're not talking about the repression, the attacks on protesters, the totalitarian regime, the Ayatollah anymore. That's last month. Now it's all the strait. And until he can get the strait open, we're staying there. This is something he's staking his presidency on. And unfortunately, he has no leverage to make it happen.
Yeah, and meanwhile, when he does talk about protesters, they're all AI generated women who were about to be hung that he saved by so sending social media posts to himself, essentially. I'm worried about this. I think that as I become less and less worried about impending doom or violence, I also understand that some analysis shows that it will take, at least 6 months to actually clear the strait once, conditions normalize and all of this. Add to that the fact that we're going to start seeing the oil shock over the coming weeks, like week or weeks. This is going to get much, much worse economically and in always, if not militarily.
The people paying $7 a gallon are pretty shocked now, I'll tell you, in California. But yeah, we're looking at a state now where this just becomes a long, protracted crisis that raises prices for people. It makes life incrementally worse for you every week until it just gets bad enough that either Republicans revolt or the people vote these people out. I mean, as you said, it's about 5 months to clear the strait. And then after that, even if we do, Qatar, the UAE saying it could be up to 6 months before oil and natural gas shipments are normalized. So you're looking into 2027 before we even begin to recover from this. that is a long time for people to hurt.
Well, and it also, look, I mean, in the meantime, our bases in the Middle East have been destroyed. You know, it is not just a matter of flipping the switch back on, right? It is real infrastructure challenges, and we need administrators, right? We need people who can administrate that kind of restructuring and infrastructure.
Yeah. Find me someone who can do math.
Fortunately, we've got some real creative thinkers on our team. Max, what's coming up next week? What are we looking at? I know the Virginia vote and redistricting comes up in court on Monday.
Yep, that'll be an interesting fight as well. The RNC chose a really strange small town judge in very conservative Tazewell County to give them this opinion. This judge has basically given Republicans any opinion they want. He's almost always overturned. I think the expectation now is redistricting will go forward. But then we also have this looming war powers vote. And it seems like something that Mike Johnson, for once, is not going to be able to hold off.
All right. Well, if that happens, we will talk about it next week on It's the End of the Week. Max Burns, thank you. Where can everyone find you?
You can follow me on Twitter at @TheMaxBurns, and I'm writing every Wednesday in Dame Magazine and The Hill.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. See you next week.